The carnivore diet is awful. It's unhealthy, it's going to give you a heart attack, and your joints are going to be absolutely destroyed with gout. Well, actually, no, it won't do all that. But that's probably what your doctor has told you, or somebody else on the internet if you've asked them about the carnivore diet. You've undoubtedly been told that gout is all about eating too much red meat and the carnivore diet is going to cause you problems. But think again. Gout has actually been unfairly labeled as a quote-unquote meat eater's disease for decades. But modern science is actually painting a very, very different picture. Stick with me as we explore the real culprits behind gout, uric acid, sugar, and of course, lifestyle. And uncover whether the carnivore diet is a friend or foe in your fight against this shockingly painful condition. Spoiler alert, it's your friend. Big time. First though, what is gout? Now, if you have gout, you already know, of course, it's a bloody painful condition. If you don't know, gout is an inflammatory arthritis caused by uric acid buildup and deposition within the joints, particularly the big toe, knees, and ankles. It can come on suddenly, often at night, with intense pain, redness, and swelling. And it can be truly incredibly painful and unbearable. And sadly, just like all chronic diseases, it's getting increasingly prevalent. In fact, it now affects over 55 million people. And by 2050, it's estimated to affect almost 100 million people worldwide. Crazy! Of course, historically, this has been referred to as a disease of kings, or only a condition that rich people got. But gout is now affecting everybody, rich or otherwise. But why? Well, first, let's take a look at what actually causes gout. And that's uric acid buildup. Uric acid, if you don't know, is a waste product of purine metabolism. Don't worry, we'll come back to purines later to explain. Normally, the kidneys filter out and excrete the uric acid into urine. But if too much uric acid is produced, or too little is excreted, of course levels can rise in the bloodstream, a condition we call hyperuricemia. This excess uric acid can form sharp crystals that settle in the joints. Gout flares are often triggered by dietary factors like alcohol, sugary drinks, or purine-rich foods. Dehydration also plays a big role. The classic scenario is the classic Aussie barbecue. Look, some stereotypes are real. We do have a lot of barbecues here in Australia. And people go out to a barbecue, they drink some beers, have some burgers, don't drink any water, and bam, they get gout. But was that the meat to blame? No, it was actually the alcohol and the bun, not the meat. The carnivore diet is not bad for gout. It's actually incredibly good at fixing it. But let's again take a step back. Why do we actually have uric acid if it's so bad for us? Well, just like cholesterol, which is a topic for another video, so make sure you subscribe if you want to hear my view on statins and cholesterol, uric acid isn't bad as such, only when it gets too high. It's actually a very powerful antioxidant in the body that helps to neutralize dangerous free radicals. However, like a lot of things, when it accumulates, it becomes problematic, just like many other things in the body. Let's come back to purines. What are they, and how and why are they involved with uric acid and gout? Purines are these organic compounds found in all living cells, including the cells of plants, animals, and humans. They are essential for life as they form the building blocks of DNA and RNA. Specifically, purines are part of nucleotides, such as adenine and guanine, which are crucial for genetic material and energy transfer in cells, for example, ATP production. Purines are derived from two main sources: dietary intake, so high purine foods, for example, including typically things like organ meats, they're actually very high. Red meat is quite high, shellfish is very high, but actually some plant-based foods like mushrooms, legumes, and spinach, we'll come back to these later. And then endogenous production. That means produced inside the human body. The human body actually naturally synthesizes purines to meet those metabolic demands. Let's take a closer look at some of the purine content in some popular foods to try and better understand the link between purines and uric acid. Now, of course, the one we're always told is red meat, But is that really actually the highest? Not necessarily. Purines are usually measured in milligrams per 100 grams of food. And purine metabolism ultimately determines the production of uric acid. But not all purine-rich foods affect gout equally, so it gets confusing. Now, high purine foods, typically 150 to 800 milligrams per 100 grams, these may be the most likely to contribute to uric acid production and potentially gout, though, we'll explain later, there are caveats. Organ meats are typically very high, like liver and kidney, about 300 to 800 milligrams. Small fish like sardines, mackerel, anchovies, and of course, seafood is also in this category. Red meat typically is around 100 to 150 milligrams, actually surprisingly not the highest. Chicken and turkey are actually a little bit higher on average. These are around 100 to 150 milligrams again. Other foods in this moderate category include things like pork, but also plant-based foods like spinach, mushrooms, asparagus, and cauliflower, around 50 to 100 milligrams. Now, low purine foods typically are things like fruit, and these are generally thought to be safe for people managing gout, but fructose can be a big problem, which we'll come back to later. Fruits and vegetables tends to be a bit on the lower side of the purine intake, ranging between about 0 and 10, maybe 20 milligrams. Grains and dairy tend to also be quite low. But these are not necessarily the foods I would recommend you eating. Of course, I follow a carnivore diet, about 99% carnivore. But you don't necessarily have to do a carnivore diet. Any low-carb diet could be very beneficial. Purine content of food is important, but that's not the only thing that causes gout. We need to talk about sugar, carbs, and fructose. Now, you knew this was coming because the carnivore diet is a big help. Purines have historically taken the blame, but fructose might actually be a much, much bigger problem. Fructose is a very simple sugar found in predominantly fruits and honey, but especially high in high fructose corn syrup products. This has emerged as a massive risk factor for gout. Unlike other sugars, fructose is metabolized almost entirely in the liver, where it depletes ATP. This is your body's energy currency. This breakdown process of fructose actually generates uric acid as a byproduct, spiking levels greatly in the bloodstream. There are studies demonstrating this. You guys just need to Google them. But if you want a link, there's a JAMA study which followed about 46,000 men and found that those consuming 2 or more sugar-sweetened beverages a day, that's not even that high, had an 85% increased risk of gout compared to those who didn't do that. Another study in the BMJ showed that fructose, more than purine-rich foods, was directly linked to higher uric acid levels and gout risk. High fructose corn syrup in processed foods is a particular problem. High fructose corn syrup, or HFCS, is often found in things like sodas, snacks, and condiments. And this is a hyper-concentrated source of fructose. Overconsumption can totally overwhelm the liver, leading to chronically high uric acid levels. We can't talk about this, though, without talking about metabolic syndrome, which we know is also linked with high fructose corn syrup and, of course, seed oils. Metabolic syndrome is intimately linked with excessive carbohydrates as well as seed oil consumption and is a key player in gout. If you don't know what metabolic syndrome is, it's a condition or a collection of symptoms characterized by high blood sugar, abdominal obesity, high triglycerides and dyslipidemia, insulin resistance, and hypertension. This plays a massive role in gout development, as well as a whole heap of other problems. Insulin resistance particularly impairs the kidney's ability to excrete uric acid, increasing those levels in the bloodstream. Chronically high insulin levels also promote inflammation. We know this is true, creating the perfect storm for gout flares. Gout is an inflammatory condition, and systemic inflammation from poor metabolic health can worsen flare severity and frequency. Elevated inflammatory markers like C-reactive protein, ESR, these kinds of things are very common with gout, and particularly also metabolic syndrome. Pro tip, if your CRP is above 1, you probably have metabolic syndrome. So is red meat, and of course by extension the carnivore diet, a problem for gout? Well, actually, no. Contrary to popular belief, and I'm sure the scare stories your doctor has told you, studies actually show that meat alone is not actually a primary trigger for gout. Whilst red meat contains purines, its contribution to uric acid levels is actually minor compared to sugar and alcohol. Many traditional societies consume a very high meat diet, but they also have extremely low levels of gout, likely due to the absence or near absence of sugar and, of course, processed food. And gout on the carnivore diet is actually incredibly rare, though there is a caveat. So can a carnivore diet help? Yes. Despite eating a ton of red meat, most people on the carnivore diet eat probably around 1 to 2 pounds of meat a day, which is around 500 grams to 1 kilogram a day in metric. A carnivore diet might actually dramatically improve your gout risk factors for some people. And it does this by a few ways. Of course, we've really already mentioned these. Improved insulin sensitivity is the really big one here. By cutting out carbohydrates and sugar, but particularly fructose, as I mentioned, the carnivore diet can significantly reduce your risk of gout. Insulin resistance, we know, is intimately linked with gout, and high uric acid and gout should primarily be considered a metabolic disease. Reduced inflammation is also a factor here, and we know carnivore, of course, being a low-carb ketogenic diet, is likely to reduce inflammation. Carnivore dieters almost exclusively have very low CRP levels, which can really, again, help with gout management. So how do we reduce the risk of gout? Well, really, it's to focus on the real triggers. Unfortunately, though, if you're prone to gout, you can't just watch this video and go, I'm going to eat loads of meat and thinking it's going to go away. If you're still eating all that other crap, it's actually going to be worse. You've got to get rid of what's actually causing it. So consider making the following lifestyle changes. Number one is to eliminate sugar and fructose. Cut out all those sugary drinks, snacks, but particularly any sweetened beverage like cola. High fructose corn syrup laden products massively increase uric acid production, so that needs to go. Number two is to limit high fructose fruits like apples, pears, grapes, if you get gout symptoms and they're causing a problem. Of course, a carnivore diet pretty much will take out all of these as well. So that's number three, adopt a low-carb, keto, or carnivore diet and emphasize nutrient-dense whole foods like meat, fish, and eggs. Number four is to avoid processed foods and refined carbs to improve your metabolic health. Number five is to drink plenty of water and help to flush uric acid from your system. As we mentioned, dehydration can exacerbate gout flares. And of course, all of this really is going to lead to number six, which is fixing metabolic syndrome. Alongside dietary changes, though, like the carnivore diet, also start to incorporate regular exercise, manage stress, and prioritize sleep to help improve insulin sensitivity, metabolic syndrome, and overall health. Now, I did mention, though, there is a caveat, and that's in the very early days of a carnivore diet, it can actually trigger gout. It's not the fault of the red meat, but when you go on a carnivore diet, your insulin levels typically fall significantly and quickly. Insulin actually plays a suppressive role in uric acid production. So as insulin falls, your uric acid can actually rise. Now, if you haven't had gout before, it's not likely to be a problem, and it's not likely to trigger gout if you've never had it. But if you have had gout before, it could happen. So you just need to watch out for it. But don't be alarmed. It's not likely to come back if you stay on a carnivore diet. So hopefully by now, you realize that gout isn't simply about eating meat and red meat. And of course, a carnivore diet isn't necessarily going to make it worse. In fact, it often makes it dramatically better. It's all about overall metabolic health. And whilst purines do play a role, and of course meat is high in purines, sugar, fructose, and insulin resistance are really the real culprits for most people. A well-formulated carnivore diet which eliminates or near eliminates sugar and massively improves metabolic health could completely lower your risk of gout. So if you've been avoiding red meat due to fear of gout, it's actually time to reconsider. Focus on the bigger picture, zoom out and look at your overall health and of course, the root causes of gout, not just the symptoms. If you're ready to take your health to the next level, join me over at themeatmedic.com, where you can join our free community, check out the courses and guides available. Thank you guys for watching this episode. I'll see you in the next one.